Please welcome Bishop Hutterer. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you've been.
Okay, well, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, and all right, Minnesota fans.
That's the kind of crowd we are at 9:30 worship here. So
you know, I have to say they introduced themselves right away coming in the door. So I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it's interesting when you talk about blessings, because I belong to a congregation that blessed me, and I felt a call to ministry early on in my life because of that congregation. I thought, if this is what God's love is like, I want to be a part of that. So from there, I was in St. Paul, Minnesota. I moved to St. Joseph, Missouri. I moved back to Minnesota. I moved to Wisconsin. From Wisconsin, I moved to Illinois. From Illinois, I moved to Minnesota. And from Minnesota, ended up in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've been there it'll be 10 years at the end of this year.
now, I started out in Phoenix, Arizona. I was born in Phoenix, then family moved to Tucson, Arizona. That's where Pastor Diane and I met when we were in high school in our church youth group. So young people, be involved in your church. And we were married, and then soon after that we moved to Colorado Springs, and then we went off to seminary in Chicago, and during that time we also lived in Yellowstone Park and in Dallas-Fort Worth for internship, going back to Chicago all the time, and then we ended up going back to Colorado Springs for our first call as pastors there, to the same church we were in. Then Paul was born, health problems. We had to move to Denver so he could have open heart surgery at the Children's Hospital. It was a little lower altitude, which was good for him. But then we were told we had to move to sea level because his lungs weren't developing, and it was a life or death issue. So we ended up moving back to Dallas-Fort Worth, which is at sea level. And then after 9 years, we felt that God was calling us to go somewhere else. And we pretty much said, okay, Lord, but anywhere but Las Vegas, because we have no reason to go to Las Vegas. We don't gamble, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's hot. And God said, you're going to go to Las Vegas, and we love it. We are so happy about that. So one thing about pastors is we tend to have experiences in lots of different locations. That's just the nature of who we are and what we do. But we have some commonalities in that.
Well, it's being open to God's call, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you have to be willing to listen and go where you're called, even if you don't think you really want to go there.
Yep, but not Phoenix. Okay, so, which is what you kind of were saying too, the same as us, is you were saying, okay, let me exclude some places, Lord. And God said, well, you know, funny thing is, I have something for you.
It's true, because even when I graduated from seminary, I thought, I'm going to say I'm open to going to, you get to, as a seminary student, when you graduate, you can give an idea of what you're open to. So I thought Pennsylvania, Iowa, and California. I thought that's a pretty broad. So when I got assigned to Central Southern Illinois Synod, it was like, what? That wasn't on the list.
So I've taken to be praying to God, please, Lord, don't send me to Hawaii. So it's just not working out. So this time God's listening to my prayer. So being a pastor then, that was a whole process. And you shared with me that you've been a pastor now for 18 years. So that would have been like 2003, that time frame there. Yeah. So you thought, okay, Lord, I'm following your call. I'm being a pastor. You end up in Phoenix. What were you doing in Phoenix as a pastor?
Yeah, I was living in Minnesota, and my husband had died, and I knew that he was experiencing life abundant and resurrection life, but I wondered where my resurrection was. We'd been married for 27 years. He died of ALS. He had fallen down our basement stairs and broke the drywall, cracked through to the cement, broke his neck. And it was a year later they determined that he had ALS, and he died a year later than that. So it was a really fast experience.
And how long ago was that?
This was 10 years ago.
That was 10 years ago, yeah. Okay.
And so grateful that we were in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area at the time. because of the call that I had and the number of family members and friends who walked with us during that time was a deep blessing. And we experienced love in so many ways that would have been difficult to experience if we would have been in Illinois. So grateful for that. After he died, I was opening myself up for call to figure out where God was really leading me. And through a process and prayer every day, received a call to serve at Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest. And it was a good call in many ways. It was a good fit for all of the gifts and all of the things I had prayed about. But I had hoped that I was going to be able to stay in Minnesota. And those of you from Minnesota understand that. And so when this call came and I said, but God, it's in Arizona. And immediately whoever talks to us at that moment said, you didn't pray about a location. And so there I was in Phoenix, and this new life happened. It was a great call with Lutheran Social Services. Through that call, I met many congregations and pastors and found out about the incredible work that people are doing throughout the church. And one of my stops was in Tucson, Arizona at New Spirit, where I met Pastor Alan Field. And it ends up that Pastor Alan Field and I got married after I became bishop. And so that was another point of new life. And certainly the election of being bishop.
Okay, you're getting ahead. She's starting to answer questions I haven't asked yet.
Wait a minute.
But we've done this twice. We've done this twice already. But you talk a lot about call, and we pastors say that God calls us to be a certain place. Like God, says, okay, I want you to be in a different location. So it's like answering a phone call. So that's why, if you're wondering, what's all this talk about call? That's what it is. So you were called to be a pastor. You've been in different locations. You were called to go to Phoenix, where that Lutheran social service, which is different than ours in Nevada, which is located centered here in Las Vegas. So you were doing that. And then what were the circumstances that God called you to then become bishop? How did that work?
Every 6 years, the Grand Canyon Synod, which is a geographic area that includes St. George, Utah, the southern half of Nevada, and all of Arizona. Every 6 years, we gather to elect a bishop. And so that was the year 2018 was the year that there were names that were surfaced. They're nominated from the floor, and my name came through that. And through that process, I was elected to serve in this role.
The idea is every pastor is eligible to be elected to be a bishop through the process, and oftentimes it will happen that the person really has no desire to do something like that. It's not like we're campaigning or anything like that, but there are a lot of us who say, no, don't even put my name in there for lots of reasons. For us, our son Paul, so that happened with you, that your name was put forth, people started voting for you, and we keep voting until someone receives a majority vote. That's how we elect bishops in our church. And it is pastors and representatives from all the churches. So how many bishops do we have in the United States of America?
The United States is broken up into 65 geographic areas. And so there are 65 bishops, and then we have a presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton. So there are 66 bishops in the United States that are a part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.
And they are not for life. Once you're elected, a 6-year term, and you're eligible for a second 6-year term, and then after that, someone else will be elected. And it doesn't mean you have to go for that whole period, but that is the term that we have. And there's a lot of roles that a bishop plays, but our synod is a large geographical area. There are some where there will be 100 churches that make up the synod that are part of a city, like Minneapolis or Chicago. And so those bishops don't have to travel very far to get to all their churches. For you, it is a long travel to get to all the churches. The geographic area is a challenge, and that brings about also diversity that other synods may not be confronted with. So how far have you gotten so far in the years you've been bishop in covering the whole geographic area?
I thought that one of the goals when I entered into the office is that the 3 rostered ministers on our staff, on our team, would visit every congregation within the first 18 months, and we did that. My goal was to get to every congregation within the first 2 years, and I quickly realized because of there's so much travel involved that wasn't going to happen. But then COVID happened, and that's another layer on all of this. So you are number 57 of the 85 to 90 congregations that we have. So I'm really glad to be here.
And we do not take any offense at not being in the top 3. But when you called and said you'd like to join us for worship on this weekend, I knew, she's in town for something else, because it is very difficult, especially during this era, to be traveling so much. But tell everybody why you are in the Las Vegas Henderson area.
The reason I'm in this area this weekend is because yesterday we ordained Lourdes Olson, who was a member at Living Hope in Las Vegas. She did her internship at Holy Spirit in Las Vegas, and now she's been ordained and will serve at New Song in Henderson, your neighbor.
Okay. And so last weekend you heard the interview with Kylie, who is now at seminary studying to be a pastor, and she's at the same seminary Pastor Diane and I were at, Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago. And our class, our graduating class, was 60 students. Her class, her entrance class, is 15, which means that we're hoping maybe 10 of them will graduate to become pastors. Not all of them will be pastors in a congregation like this. So that's a vast difference, and it's not just that seminary, it's all of them. The same's happened with your seminary that you went to in Minnesota. But what has been your experience? It's kind of like an opposite experience rather than that there just aren't enough pastors. You've had a lot of interaction with that.
We've been very fortunate in the Grand Canyon Synod. In the I'm in my 4th year serving as bishop, and we've had 9 ordinations, and we've had 12 installations, which means that we've had new pastors, new ideas, new people. It's more than a 4th, but less than a 3rd.
Now, the difference between ordination and installation is the first time you receive a call to a church, you are ordained as a pastor, and that's for life. And then when you go to a different location, then you're installed as a pastor.
Right.
So all the ordinations were first-time pastors, and the rest were moving for some reason or other. That's a lot of movement in a region of about 90 churches.
It is indeed.
So that is a good thing. So things changed in 2020. What challenges has that brought out to the larger church? We're familiar very much with our local congregation, but what have you seen and experienced?
Yeah, I think that for some churches it was a little easier to make the transition than it was for others. I see that you here at Christ the Servant have been able to, you were already doing technology. You were already familiar with what it was to be online. And because of the gift of music and the way that you've been worshiping together, for some congregations that was a little tougher. So we see, I would say that transition can be difficult. And so for some pastors who don't have the same technical skills, it's a little bit more challenging. And I think the other thing that has made ministry challenging during this particular time is that, and you kind of touched on this with the Corinthians reading, there are certain things that can cause divisiveness for us, and mask wearing might be one of those things that causes divide. So we have pastors We're having to go in between those who want to wear masks and those who don't want to wear masks, as well as technology, and so it's pulled them in a lot of different directions. The other side to that is, though, I've also seen great opportunities and people rising to the occasion to learn new things, to be aware of the Holy Spirit's activity, and that we are being invited to do church in new ways, and maybe we wouldn't have gone that quickly if it wouldn't have been for COVID. So there are mixed blessings.
Yeah, we in the church are an entity that does not change very much or does not change very swiftly, and in just a few months' time, churches were forced sometimes to do generations worth of change, which can really bring about a lot of, surprise and discontent and resistance. But it's necessary. We just have to make changes because everything around us changed, and to ignore that is to invite becoming obsolete and just drifting out of existence. And so we do have many challenges, because we all remember, boy, when this place was filled up, and that was a big Sunday. Now we look around right now on this weekend and we say, wow, there's more people than I expected on a holiday weekend with bad COVID going around. And, so our experiences have also changed. Now, the level of joy that we experience has not lessened at all. Maybe the gratitude we experience has increased during this time as we have been changed by what could be something that could beat us down. So that's a great lesson for the church, to be able to see there's bad all around us, but we are conquerors. We are more than conquerors through Christ our Lord. And that's what we truly experience. So let's talk about the larger church even, because your involvement is not just in our region, our synod. You're involved. What's going on in the larger church that you have been involved with?
Well, there's three things that I'd like to just lift up. One is that we have a companion synod in Senegal, and I was blessed to be able to go and spend time in the country of Senegal, meet with the pastors. It's a 95% Muslim majority country. So to learn how Christians and Muslims get along together, what are the joys and what are the challenges of ministry in that particular situation. So we continue to grow that relationship, and the president of the Lutheran Church in Senegal will be joining us for Synod Assembly in June. The second is that we're working on a companion synod relationship with the Lutheran Church of Mexico. There are 11 Lutheran churches in the country of Mexico, and they also have experienced some challenges. They've experienced challenges particularly because of drug cartel activity. And so to get to know what their challenges are and what their joys are, and so we'll formalize that relationship. It is our hope to formalize that during Synod Assembly in June. And then the third area is I was also blessed to go on a trip to the Holy Land and learn more about ELCA's program of Peace Without Walls. And so to hear the Palestinian Christian perspective of what's going on there and how it is to live to be a minority in that country of Palestine and Israel. And so to that end, I will be hosting a trip to the Holy Land in January of 2023. And if you're interested, there's room on the trip.
We would love to hear more about the whole Mexico experience. Pastor Diane has led 19 Mexico mission trips, and 2020 was supposed to be our big 20th anniversary celebration, but COVID changed that. We don't know when that will be able to resume, so we'd love to hear that. You haven't heard about our relationship with Senegal because we have been working with Liberia, because we've had a close personal connection with the Liberian refugees in town and Pastor Jackson Jayla, and that's why we've built the orphanage and the school there, and that's been our focus. We also assist our Tamil language Indian church with ministry in India, and now most recently, especially in some regions of India where you're not just a minority population, but you are executed for being a Christian. And it is very difficult to assist in those ministries because if we send too much money at a time, they will get noticed and the money will be stolen from them and they could lose their life. So it's the kind of thing where maybe $200 at a time is what would only send to that. So it's a reminder that the ministry around the world is so vital and challenging, and that's one way that we can really be effective is as a larger church joined together. And that's how a bishop differs from a pastor, is you have a broader range of involvement and responsibility. And we are also thankful that the work that you and the bishops do, that we could not possibly do just as our own congregation. So thank you for all of that.
That's right. It is church, being church together. It really does expand. God, the Holy Spirit works through what we're able to do together to be in places that we individually cannot be.
Okay, yeah. So there's a whole lot more we'd like to talk about, but I always like to give you an opportunity. What question do you have for our bishop at this time? Yes.
Would you please compare the membership in the ELCA and Drach-Meinel Synod nationwide with Grand Canyon versus nationwide over the past, say, 5-10 years?
Okay, can you say something about the population of our Lutheran churches in our synod as well as nationally and how it has changed over the few years?
Yeah, I don't have all of those figures at my fingertips. I can tell you that currently, I think that for the ELCA church-wide, as we talk about across the United States, about 3.2 million members. And it was, I think 10 years ago, maybe around 5 million members. So there's been a decrease in that. And in the Grand Canyon Synod, that's a really hard number to get. We think, from the best judgment from the reports that are turned in by congregations, and I don't know what the past was, I just know right now we're about 30,000 people that are associated with churches in the Grand Canyon Synod.
Yeah, it is very hard for us to gauge, especially now, because so many things have changed. The number of people that are participating in live in-person worship, of course, has gone down significantly, but then the participation in online worship has gone up, but that's much harder to gauge. And also, the frequency of worshiping looks like there's been more decline because you may have come to worship every week pre-COVID. Now you might only come once a month. Or maybe you came once a month and now you come once every couple of months. So even though we will have the same number of people involved, what you see is different. And that's across the board. And we're not sure what's going to happen over the next few years, if it's going to bounce back, or if this is kind of where everything is settled.
There's one more piece, and I think that affects the people in the Southwest, and maybe Texas and Florida, is that we do have people who spend half of the year somewhere else and half of the year in a different location. So that also affects numbers, and so that it is a little more difficult to pull that together.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what's kind of the breakdown in age in our population in the church? And by the way, our worship service translates really well to phones. I want you to know that. You do our worship on the phone. It's awesome.
That is one of the good things about COVID, is many people have gone online, and so you can access worship. I would say, again, this is hard, but I don't think it's any surprise that our Lutheran church, the ELCA, tends to skew more older. One of the initiatives that was launched by Churchwide and is part of our synod and congregational piece of strategy to think about reaching 1 million new, young, and diverse people so that they might know the way of Jesus. And we know that people are hungry to know Jesus. We know that there's a sense of meaning and purpose in life, and so how do we engage with people in ways that are meaningful?
And that's why we do have such an emphasis. We hire our young people during the summer to lead our Camp Hope. And then when we have the opportunity, we hire young people to be on our staff, like Matthew and like Anthony that you see in the office and cleaning, and like Kylie. And that's, a concerted effort that we have, because we know that we do need to have young people involved, and we love looking around and seeing lots of young people in worship too. I get frustrated when I'm in a group of pastors, and it's like, okay, who are pastors that are under the age of 30? We don't have any. It's so hard, and okay, who are the young ones? And that's a challenge that we do have in a rapidly changing society.
So you are to be commended for the ways in which you support young people, and that you talk and have conversation about a sense of call. And when you see something in a younger person, that you can call that out and help to nurture that and have those conversations.
So remember to give to Kylie's scholarship fund. You can never say that enough. We're going to have to move along here, and there's so much more we want to talk about. I'll be editing as much as I can and putting the interview online, and so that'll be later in the week or so. So thank you so much, Bishop Deborah Hutterer, for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
And